Hello, everyone. I'm Christina Arangio. Welcome to another edition of The Real Deal, the show where we break down real-life concerns with a candid conversation about this crazy, messy, beautiful thing we call life. And as always, Dr. Julie Morison is here with me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Founder and director of HPA Live Well. I first wanted to ask you what you think about this cold weather and how you're coping with it.
I don't like it. But I just had this conversation with someone. They're like, so unless you just moved here, what'd you think was going to happen?
Right, exactly,
It's
right.
winter. We've done this a few times, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. But the other thing is it's always a good icebreaker, no pun intended, right? If you don't have anything else to say to someone, you can say,
Yeah.
wow, what have you been doing in the cold?
Exactly. Oh, how are you getting through it? Do you care? Do you mind? Or do you like the cold weather?
That's right.
I know, so
That's
true.
right.
Somehow, we're looking at February already. I mean, the time is flying by. But this gives us the perfect focus for a topic that we're really going to look at over a series of different episodes here. And it has to do with eating disorders because it's Eating Disorder Awareness Month. Do I have that correct?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So this is something that is incredibly important to you, Julie. And if I remember correctly, you told me that this is really how your whole practice got started. Is that right?
Yeah. So our practice really, we do treat, a wide range and pretty much all mental health concerns. But we do have a huge focus on eating disorders. So we have an intensive outpatient treatment program for eating disorders as well as a family-based treatment program. And really it started because what we were learning was that oftentimes, years and years ago, because now I'm dating myself for how long we've been running this program, but years and years ago, it used to be that, people would be sent away for treatment, and then they'd come back and really not do well. Because what we've learned over time is that people need to really recover in the place they're going to live their recovered lives.
In their environment.
So we started treatment programs to really try to meet those needs, and it's just grown over time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's so much to the topic, and I've only learned that through you.
So much, yep.
So we figured we'd start with looking at different types of eating disorders and then eventually get into, why they develop, how they develop. And even in, I know them as anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating, but there's really subsections of each.
That's right, yep. And there's a couple that are sort of otherwise known eating disorders. So some of the stuff that we're seeing, an example, you mentioned anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, but there's also something called ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And that's a really interesting eating disorder because we've seen it go up significantly. And it's often seen in folks that struggle with autism, on the autism spectrum.
Wow.
And it's also a response to things like, so it's somebody who avoids eating.
Do you eat nothing? You're basically
it's
almost
more
fasting?
around it's more avoidance around things like textures and smells.
Oh, sure. That
some
is
of those
very
sensitivities
common
that will
in
come
those.
with that spectrum disorder.
Yes.
But there's additional concerns. It also falls under ARFID for people who have, say, a fear of choking, where maybe they had a choking incident and now they're terrified to eat. So, hey, how am I going to avoid choking? I'm not going to eat.
That can also be sensory, too. Even autism, I know, even with Down syndrome, especially when my son was really little, there is that constant fear. You have to cut up their things so small because they're not feeling the food, and they'll choke.
Right. So, and that really, the hallmark of that is that food avoidance is outside of any desire for weight loss or any concerns related to weight, shape, and size. But it is one that a lot of pediatricians deal with quite a bit, is ARFID.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I know you're going to be enlightening me this whole conversation, but one thing that I do know from our previous conversations is that this isn't really about the food.
It's not about the food. If it was about the food, it might even be a lot easier to treat, right? So what we like to say is that no behavior is an accident, right? Every behavior has a purpose behind it, a function behind it. And so when we look at disordered eating, we are gonna miss it if we think it's just related to food. Or even weight, shape, and size. Sometimes it's not just that maintains the eating disorder. So I think it's important that people know what they're talking about, right? So a couple of things, right? So anorexia, the hallmark of anorexia is food refusal, restricting what you're eating, and losing weight and wanting to continue to lose weight despite already being thin. Now, years ago, the deal was you had to be a certain level of underweight in order to qualify as anorexia. And they did away with that, and they did it because people who who are underweight or who are losing weight and continuing to want to lose weight at this rapid rate, they actually don't have to be underweight to qualify for anorexia. It's considered atypical anorexia. So someone who maybe started higher may have had that precipitous weight drop, but they weren't super underweight. So they get missed a lot of times. They go into their primary care and they haven't been eating and they had this huge weight loss and their doctor says, wow, you look great. And there's no reflection on how they got there or what's happened there. And a lot of times it was missed. So anorexia really is that fear of weight gain and true fear. So food avoidance because of that fear of weight gain. Whereas bulimia is often just the hallmarks of that is binge eating. So eating in a way that feels like you have no control. It's almost in a sense like you don't know what's happening while you're doing it. And then it's a uh-oh moment where it's, I need to compensate for what I just did.
I ate and I don't want this in my body.
Exactly. And so compensation. Now compensation, people think that's only, making yourself vomit. It's also laxatives, diet pills, diuretics, overexercise, anything that says I have to undo what I just did.
All falls under bulimia.
Yep.
Into that category. Yep. I just want to stop you one sec, but I want to go through everything. Yeah, sure. You mentioned primary care, and that's really key here because, especially when you think you lose a little weight, and your doctor's like, "Oh, you're doing well, great." I just had my physical, and there's so many questions they ask you now, right? So much of it. Do you feel safe? And depression, alcohol, smoking.
Yes.
I don't think I remember any question about that, and it is getting, like you said, missed. So I don't even know if there's so many different reasons that we're going to get into, what could you even put on a form that, and then the person has to admit to it too.
That's correct.
But should it be something that now, and again, I'm looking, down the road from what we're talking about here, but should primary care and doctors be asking about this when you're sitting in there face to face with them?
Well, they should be asking about it, at least looking at change over time. So a patient comes in and they've lost 15 pounds. Your doctor should ask how. They should ask what motivated that behavior. How did you do it? How are you maintaining it? Did something come up? Because a weight loss or a weight gain is usually indicative of some sort of something triggered that change.
Yes.
Right? And so I think that yes, they should be asking, but more so I think what we're wondering about is, are they catching what's in front of them? When I talk to doctors, when I talk to primary cares, a lot of the reason they kind of stay away from this is they're not really sure what to do if they find out the answer is yes, that there's a problem. Because doctors really haven't been taught a whole lot as to how to address this. I did a grand rounds for Albany Medical Center somewhat recently over this last year, both for the Department of Medicine and then again for pediatrics. And the constant conversation is around, unless a patient is seen in your office or during residency that has an eating disorder and you have a chance to learn it firsthand, it's not something that's very often taught. Right. And so it's really easy to miss. And then you look at our world where weight, shape, and size is a driving force.
Oh my God,
right?
More than ever.
It absolutely.
Given
and then we have social media, and then you've got, all the use of GLP-1s now and all of that. Right. So it is a moving target.
Okay, so the first part of that then I guess is when they're in medical school, this needs to be something that they look at more because it's so true. You lose weight, then people think, oh gosh, could I have cancer? Could there's something like that going, or I've gained weight. Is it a thyroid issue? Sure. But no one, I shouldn't say no one, but a doctor may not be as equipped to be like, I wonder if it could be. And
well, because the other thing is that, also if a doctor notices a weight loss and you are defended against that being called out, right? So especially this happens with kids, mostly teens, where the kid goes in for their physical and they're like, man, you're down 15 pounds. It's not normal or healthy for a 16-year-old to be down 15 pounds. What's going on? The kid's ready with an excuse, right?
Of course,
they say, well, I run track, or I've just been really stressed, or I'm anxious, or, my schedule changed. And a lot of times doctors are okay with, well, we'll just wait and watch. We'll see. Or they'll say, okay, well, let's talk about healthy eating, and I'd like you to do a little better this time, fine. But then they wait 3, 6, 9, 12 months to see the kid again. A lot can happen in a short period of time.
Normally your physical's once a year. So let's say, you're only in there once a year and somehow you've escaped being sick enough so you're not going back to your primary care or you're hiding?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. I didn't mean to get you off track. I just thought that was so interesting because that is one that I'm not seeing on any forms.
Well, exactly. And the thing is, there are forms. I mean, there are standardized measures that can assess whether or not somebody has an eating disorder. There's actually a couple question survey that we can do, or where you ask people. It's called the SCOFF questionnaire, which is literally just a couple of questions to ask about some specific concerns. And if they can do that, that's actually generally a really reliable way for a doctor to know, something's a little wrong. So it's an example of, have you lost a certain amount of time, weight in a certain amount of time? Have you ever made yourself sick? Things like that. Those are pretty face valid questions, though, right? So if I don't want to answer you, if I need to protect this eating disorder, because by the way, the only way an eating disorder survives is if I don't tell a whole lot of people about it, because they're going to tell me don't do that, right?
Exactly. You're hiding.
So these face valid questions get asked. If you have a defended kid that's like, no,
they're going to answer.
I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, they're just not going to answer that question.
Right.
So even if you have the forms, and even if your doctor's perhaps on top of it or suspects it, that's really hard to get to the root of it. Okay. So we talked about anorexia and bulimia.
Binge eating is the other big of the big three, right?
Yeah.
So binge eating disorder is technically categorized by 3 binges in a week. So binge eating is really kind of subjective. There used to be a rule about that too, a certain number of calories that had to be consumed in a short period of time.
Yeah.
They did away with it. The reason they did away with it is because the emotional torment that goes on for the person is more important than the number of calories consumed in a short period of time. So really it's indicative of this intensive eating where it's sort of a blitz, right? You're eating and eating, a lot of times not really recognizing that you're doing it. And then afterwards, just sustaining a huge level of guilt and remorse and discomfort related to the behavior you had.
Too, or is it just more?
Depression is more something that a lot of times, because we do see people who have binge eating disorder have a lot of comorbidity with depression, with the mental health pieces that are also out there. But mood regulation, it's sort of one of those things where it's a coping skill to manage some of that. Sort of, I'm depressed, and this I find comforting. And so behaviors are sort of linked in that way.
I see.
The other thing that we notice with that, and you can kind of probably picture it, is if you look at disordered eating and sort of that impulse control around it, it's actually, there's a really strong relationship between eating disorders and attention deficit disorder.
Wow.
Because there's that lack of impulse control, right? That like thought before you do something. So it's interesting. Actually, one of the only medications that is approved to treat binge eating disorder is Vyvanse, which is a medication we use for ADHD.
Interesting again, though, because it made me realize ADHD oftentimes can be linked to those who have certain developmental disabilities or different disabilities, and that is something that they're dealing with as well, potentially. Right.
Wow. Well, interestingly enough, though, think about those medicines. One of the side effects of a medication that treats attention deficit if you take Adderall, for example, it treats attention deficit. It also makes you lose your appetite. It causes significant struggles with appetite, and so weight goes down, and people no longer recognize that they're hungry. And so accidentally, and a lot of times disordered eating starts accidentally, where, you've lost weight for whatever reason, and that feels good. That feels reinforcing for some reason. Then all of a sudden, you get a bit nervous about, man, I don't want to change this weight loss. I actually want to lose a little bit more.
What can I do?
What do I do? And things get harder, more and more intense. Wow. So oftentimes we'll see kids or adults that'll say, well, I was just trying to get healthy. I was just trying to eat better, move more, which every doctor says, every Instagram, whatever says.
And then it morphs.
And then it turns into, I got a little bit of success. Or if I could have a little more success.
Yeah.
So if I ate less and I lost weight, if I eat a little less than that, maybe I'll lose a little more weight. Okay, challenge on. Oh, now more. And so then you take somebody who, it's not like they went to bed at night and thought, oh my God, anorexia sounds fun. Let's give that a shot, right? Instead, it's something that just sort of morphs over time, and then it becomes out of control. Oftentimes we'll say to people, you're just trying to solve your own problem. Just created another one by accident.
Wow. All right. Well, I knew that this would be eye-opening, and I also knew that it's definitely worthy of multiple episodes here, because I think next, if you're okay with it, we'll talk a little bit more about the health risks. I mean, I want to get into why it develops, but I know we're going to do this over time. So
you know me.
Exactly.
I just keep talking.
We'll do what we can. No. It's great. It's appreciated. We're back in a moment with more from The Real Deal. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Real Deal, everyone. Here with Julie, talking about eating disorders. And this topic has so many facets to it.
So many.
And I think we were discussing the different types, but we also wanted to get into health risks. But then again, I also was remembering age range here of those most affected, because really anybody can have an eating disorder.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so if you think about it, the stats are 1 in 5 females and 1 in 6 males will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. And I would say that, just anecdotally over, the years, we have seen, especially after COVID, a huge, huge increase in disordered eating.
Not surprising.
And unfortunately, at the end of the spectrum, all the ages, right? So more older people and more younger people.
As a result of COVID?
I don't know if it was a result, but we kind of feel a little bit like it certainly stirred the pot quite a bit.
How could it not? With isolation.
With isolation, with a lot of constant camera stuff, right? Constant time on social media.
It's the only time we could connect.
It's a tough thing, right? Plus alone. Nothing else to do, right? And so those behaviors kind of revved up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that was a significant concern.
Oh, absolutely. And the risks, I think one of the questions we were talking about is, can someone actually die from an eating disorder? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, so we actually say that eating disorders are the number one most deadly of all mental illnesses. So you're talking about, someone might think depression is because of suicide rates.
Exactly.
Eating disorders top that. Some because they are so plagued that their suicide rates go up. But when the challenge with an eating disorder is it's trifold, right? It's behavioral, it's nutritional, and it's medical. Right. And so you have 3 different domains that can wreak havoc on your body. And so, the medical concerns, you think about if you were to, try to drive your car and drive it from here to Buffalo and you didn't put in gas in it. By the time you start you're just going to start to slow down, right? You get to Syracuse and man, there's nothing left in the tank. You're not making it to Buffalo. You're going to really ruin your engine and everything's going to slow down. That's what happens to your body, or you put the wrong gas in there, right? Think about that's really what nutrition is. And so there are a lot of medical complications. There are a lot of long-term effects if it doesn't end someone's life. And it takes a lot. But it also all of a sudden can take a little. A lot of times one of our biggest challenges is that, especially kids, they'll do blood work because doctors know to do some baseline stuff, right? Some blood work. They'll say, well, my blood work came back okay. My EKG came back okay. I must not be sick enough to need treatment. The problem is bodies oftentimes are very resilient, right? Especially a teenager's body, right? They're super resilient. And so what we like to tell people, though, is that blood work is a snapshot in time. Yeah. That can change real fast.
Yes.
And so I think that's the misnomer is that, people think that they're free and clear because they feel okay. And that's just not the case.
So would you say is it suicide more than anything else, or it really runs the gamut, but really the crux or the core issue is the eating disorder?
The core issue is the eating disorder, and that's why they consider it the most deadly of all mental illnesses. And actually, it's interesting because based on that, it's very hard to find treatment providers because everybody's kind of scared. People are scared to treat these patients because they're not really sure how, and they can die.
Still.
Yeah.
Despite all of the information that's out there, it's still something that can be scary for professionals to take on.
Yeah, because you're trying to get someone who, I like to say to people all the time, we joke around about it. Every day I go to work, I feel like I'm a used car salesman, and I'm trying to sell a car that has no wheels and doesn't run to a non-driver. Good luck.
Wow.
Right? Because that a lot of times, you have to remember, a lot of times people don't start eating disorder treatment because they think they have a problem, but because they've been told they have to have treatment, right? And so when you're told to do something that's counter of what you wanted to do, right? That's not what goes along with my thought process here, right? I don't necessarily want to get better.
Yeah.
So when you tell me to do it, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's really hard to get somebody to change that way of thinking, especially when they're so rewarded by the side effect of the eating disorder, like the weight loss and the, we have a lot of kids that'll say, I was bullied. And I didn't want to be bullied anymore. I was bullied for my weight. I didn't want to be bullied anymore, so I stopped eating. And I lost all this weight, and now people are nicer to me.
And people are talking to me, and I
explain to a 15-year-old that says that to you that you should now eat regularly, risk weight gain, because that kid thinks a little bit of weight gain means those kids are going to be mean to me again, and or I'm not going to have friends the way I didn't before, and that feels way worse to me than anything you tell me is going to happen, because you know what? I've been fine so far. It's very hard to get someone to see it differently.
It makes sense. I want to get into how they develop. You gave a couple of examples there. But before that, what I meant with my question with regard to suicide was in terms of, that the reason is truly the eating disorder, and I know it can be different things happen to your body medically, but is suicide often, eating disorder is the problem, but are people taking their own lives because of the eating disorder more than anything else that is related to fatal consequences of eating disorders, or no?
So, I mean, split down the middle, which one, so does someone with an eating disorder die more because of medical consequences or from
That's essentially what I was wondering.
Rates? I think that, so first of all, while it's the most deadly, it isn't the most regular outcome. Right. So we want to remember that. Right. So eating disorder recovery is absolutely possible. Suicide in eating disorders comes when you feel like there's no way out. What we are learning over time is that death because of eating disorders outside of suicide, right, is often related to someone's choice to no longer get or to refuse treatment, and that over time, if you don't eat, you die. And so there sort of start to be sort of split issues, right? Sort of that neuroses that goes with disordered eating, that then the mood and thoughts that things would be easier if I just died. I don't see a way out of this. That hopelessness versus I'm not suicidal. I just don't care if I die from not eating. Those are two different things and really difficult. And remember, in New York State, you can force someone into treatment if they're suicidal, because you can take someone's natural human rights of independence. If they are suicidal or homicidal, you can hold them over objection. You can treat them over objection. Not with eating disorders. Even though they may lack what it seems to us that they lack capacity to make decisions. In New York State, we cannot forced treatment in most cases.
It doesn't fall under the category, like it's not part of the law?
You have to prove, so in the state, you have to prove a patient doesn't have capacity to make medical decisions, because if they're going to refuse treatment, they have to show that they have capacity to decide, if I refuse treatment, I know I could die.
Wow.
And they allow for that for most eating disorder patients. Even if you say to somebody who's in the emergency room who ended up in ICU from their eating disorder, once they're stable, they say, I don't even remember that. Yet that treatment provider deemed them having capacity, because it is so difficult in New York State to treat somebody over their objection.
Wow. There is so much to this topic. we talked a little bit about how it might develop in people, but we're
sure.
going to get into that more in the next episode, just because we're out of time already. But that's why we have decided, and you very wisely said, we're going to need a couple episodes for this one, and I certainly get it now, so we can talk more about some of these other facets.
Right.
But you were suggesting a challenge. Does it still work for today based on our conversation? I'm trying to. Okay, so tell me that real quick before we wrap up.
So one of the things that we talked about was, and I think it'll go more with the next couple of weeks, but is for people just to start thinking about, what is your thought related to your own body image? How do I feel about weight, shape, and size as it pertains to me? Is it different than I feel about everybody else? No, I don't judge someone who maybe is X, Y, or Z. Yeah. But for me, the rule is this.
You're hard on yourself.
Right. What does my body image sort of health sort of look like?
And what do we share with others? That's what I think about a lot.
And our kids.
And things I've said to my children that I regret.
And maybe not even what I've said, but what I've done in front of them.
Right. All right. So much more to this. Good. We'll tackle it in our next episode of The Real Deal. Thanks so much for joining us. Julie and I will see you next time.